They laughed at my job like it was a hobby, so I bought their house in cash. Now they live next to a freeway while I serve brunch in the home they mocked me in. I'm Sarah, and this is how I stopped begging to be respected and made them come to me instead. Before we dive in, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far this story travels. It was supposed to be just another Sunday brunch. The sun filtered gently through the linen curtains in my parents' kitchen, warming the pale quartz countertops like something out of a lifestyle magazine. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. That's how it always started. Mom had set the table with citrus slices, rosemary sprigs, and those pale blue ceramic plates she only used when people outside the family came over. Only today, it was just us. No outsiders, no witnesses. Just me, my parents, and my younger sister Emily, seated like we were about to sign a peace treaty. But I should have known. "Sarah, how's your little online gig?" Emily asked, swirling her mimosa like she was hosting a talk show. She was wearing one of those pastel wrap dresses influencers love, ironic given what came next. "I'm a conversion copywriter," I said. "And it's not little. I just helped a wellness brand triple their revenue last quarter." My dad snorted. Like I'd said I was a fairy princess or selling essential oils out of my car trunk. "Oh, sweetie," Mom said, folding her napkin with deliberate grace. "We're just worried. Real careers come with health insurance, retirement, a desk." Emily leaned in with mock concern. "Yeah, it just seems unstable, you know. I mean, no offense, but I saw a tweet yesterday calling copywriting a fancy name for selling snake oil." She laughed. Dad joined in. Mom gave a soft chuckle, like this was all lighthearted fun. My chest tightened. "You mean the tweet from the guy whose startup flopped in 6 months? I ghostwrote that entire campaign, made him $250,000 before he ghosted payroll." They blinked, but the silence didn't last. "Well, if you're doing so well," Dad said, casually slicing into his eggs, "maybe you could help out more with the mortgage again. Things have been tight." Help out again? As in, the 4 years I'd covered the shortfall without a thank you weren't enough. "Is that why I'm here?" I asked, my voice lower now, almost trembling, to be laughed at then pitched for a bailout. Emily scoffed. "God, not everything's about you." "No," I said, pushing back my chair. "It never has been." The legs of my chair scraped against the tile like a warning bell. No one moved. "You know," I added, grabbing my bag, "if I had a desk job with benefits and a 401k, maybe I wouldn't have had the time or energy to keep this family afloat for years. But I did. And you all treated it like a hobby." I stood up, heart pounding, voice calm. "I won't be the silent funder anymore. I won't sit at tables where I'm the punchline, and I'm done begging for respect from people who only clap when I fail." Mom's mouth fell open slightly. "Don't worry," I said as I walked to the door. "You'll still get the mortgage statement, just not the auto pay." And I left. Sunlight hit my face as I stepped outside, but all I felt was cold clarity. I didn't know where I was going yet. But I knew one thing: I was done being their backup plan. The air inside the grid smelled like warm rice and fresh basil the night I moved in. Compared to my parents' manicured suburbia, the downtown co-living space felt like a different planet. One where no one cared if you wore shoes indoors, or if your job had a dental plan. It was a sprawling industrial loft divided into minimalist pods, each space humming with quiet hustle and unspoken dreams. Freelancers, designers, engineers, people who didn't fit in anywhere else either. I was one of them now. The manager, a quiet woman named Talia with cropped silver hair and tattooed wrists, handed me a key fob and a linen-wrapped welcome bundle, local coffee, a blank notebook, and a lavender sleep sachet. "We do family-style dinners twice a week," she said. "No obligation, but it helps, especially when you're rebuilding." Rebuilding. That word sat heavily in my chest. I hadn't cried since the brunch. Not when I packed my car. Not when I canceled the $600 automatic mortgage contribution. Not even when I blocked Emily on everything, text, Instagram, Venmo. But standing in my bare bulb studio that night, surrounded by nothing but my laptop, a mattress, and a desk I assembled myself, it finally caught up with me. I cried, quietly, not from sadness, but release. Like I'd been holding my breath for years and could finally exhale. My studio had no closet, no TV, and barely enough room for my stuff. But it had peace. Soft lamplight bounced off the exposed brick, and a gentle breeze snuck through the cracked window like it had something to say. I unpacked slowly. First, my MacBook, still warm from a morning deadline. Then the stack of sticky notes where I tracked client revisions. And finally, a framed photo of me at 23, grinning in front of a coffee shop after landing my first remote gig. Back then, I thought being able to work from anywhere was the dream. But anywhere always ended up being my parents' dining room, because they needed help, because family came first, because I didn't want them to feel like I thought I was better than them. But now, family came second, or third, or maybe not at all. The next morning, I woke up early and walked to the neighborhood market. The sidewalks here were cracked, messy, real, like people had actually lived on them. I bought fresh bread, eggs, and rosemary, not to impress anyone, just because I wanted to. Later that week, I sat across from Talia at one of the long communal tables, both of us eating lentil stew from chipped bowls. We weren't close, but she noticed the ring of silence around me. "Want to tell me what you left behind?" she asked. I hesitated. "An identity, maybe, or at least one I didn't choose." She nodded, like she understood without needing the details. And then she asked the question that had been circling in my head for days. "Who are you without them?" I didn't answer, not out loud. But that night I journaled for the first time in months. I am a builder. I make things from scratch, with words, with grit, with nothing but Wi-Fi and stubbornness. I am not a hobbyist. I am not a fluke. I am done financing people who refuse to see me. 2 days later, I sent an email to my father. Short, clean. "Dear Dad, effective immediately, I will no longer contribute to the joint mortgage. Please update the budget accordingly." Sarah, no apology, no emotional labor, just a line in the sand. I stared at the screen after I hit send, waiting for the aftershock. But nothing came. No reply, no missed call, just silence. I half expected them to show up at the grid. Maybe Mom would try to guilt me into talking it through. Or Emily would demand access to the shared music account. But they didn't. That silence said everything. They weren't going to fix it because they didn't think it was broken. That was my job, and I'd finally quit. Later that week, someone left a sticky note on my door that said, "Nice article, clean hooks, made me click twice." I smiled. I didn't even know which client it was for. But someone saw me, even anonymously, even through a screen. I pinned that sticky note above my desk like a badge of quiet validation. This wasn't the life my family respected. But for the first time, it felt like mine. Back in the suburbs, in that perfect beige house with its perfunctory seasonal wreaths, things weren't so pristine anymore. Jason, my younger brother by 5 years, wasn't returning texts. At first, Mom told people he was just busy with work, which was her code for don't ask questions we don't want to answer. But the truth was leaking out in whispers, one awkward family group chat at a time. He'd been let go from his finance internship. Not because he missed deadlines, not because he showed up late. No, it happened in a chrome-paneled elevator after a client pitch meeting. Jason had simply stopped speaking. He stared ahead, glassy-eyed, while the VP tried to make small talk about market shifts. Didn't say a word, didn't even move. Security had to walk him out. Claire, our mother, told Gerald that Jason was probably just tired. Gerald, of course, blamed me. "This all started when Sarah walked out," he muttered one evening, according to my aunt, who's never been able to keep a secret if her life depended on it. "The family's off balance. Everything's chaos." No one said that Jason had been cracking for a while. That living up to Dad's name-dropping aspirations and Mom's brittle approval was a full-time job in itself. No, it was simpler to blame me, the sister who dared to want something different, to claim something of her own. Jason didn't go back to work. Instead, he turned up in nightclub stories on Instagram, mutual friends spotting him at bottle service tables, his button-down shirt open to his ribs, eyes wild and unfocused. One week, someone even tagged him in a photo holding sparklers in a VIP booth at a place called Citrine. Citrine. That was how I found out he was spiraling. Not from a call, not from Mom, but from an influencer's post with a disco ball emoji and the caption, "Biggest spender of the night, smiling money Jason knows vibes." He didn't look like he knew anything, just hollow. It was Emily who started the Whisper campaign. She called it concern, but I knew better. "She's the one who pulled out her payments, remember?" she said, too loudly at a brunch with relatives. That triggered all this. Jason's been flailing since Sarah left. Flailing. Like he was a wind-up toy I forgot to reset. Mom backed her up, of course. She abandoned us at the worst time, and now the stress is affecting everyone. Dad didn't disagree. He never does when Mom's on a roll. But not once, did anyone ask why I left, or how it felt to be mocked by the very people I had kept afloat for so long. No one seemed to remember the 4 years I covered the shortfall when Dad's investments tanked, or the groceries I paid for, or the car insurance that mysteriously stopped deducting from their account and started hitting mine instead. They only remembered that I walked away. Jason stopped coming home. His room stayed untouched like a shrine. Claire folded his laundry and left it on the edge of his bed as if he might reappear and thank her for it. He didn't. Meanwhile, the house grew quiet, not peaceful, just hushed, like it knew it was losing its center of gravity. I didn't call. I didn't text. I watched from the edges, distant cousins forwarding me updates through DMs, an old neighbor asking, "Hey, everything okay with your brother? Saw something weird online." But I didn't reach out. Because here's the thing no one likes to admit. Sometimes people don't fall apart because you leave. They fall apart because you stopped holding them together. Jason wasn't broken because I moved out. He was broken because no one ever let him be anything but the golden boy. Because being the reasonable son in a family built on appearances is a slow, silent unraveling. I just happened to be the first thread they noticed missing. At the grid, life moved differently. In the evenings, I wrote ad copy for eco-friendly toothbrushes and luxury loungewear brands, then made stir-fry with my roommate Dina, who played classical guitar when she thought no one was listening. I didn't miss home, but I did miss Jason. Not the Jason who spent money like armor or treated affection like currency, but the kid who used to hide behind me during thunderstorms, who once cried when he cracked my favorite mug and tried to glue it back with glittery school glue. I wondered if he remembered that too, but the calls never came. Not from him. Not yet. It came with the morning mail. A cream-colored envelope delivered to my old forwarding address by mistake, then hand-carried by one of the co-livers who knew how to read a room. He slid it under my door with a soft knock, no questions asked. Inside, the latest mortgage statement from the family home, and in the margin written in my father's stiff, impatient scrawl were the words, "Call me. This isn't a game, Sarah." I didn't call. I stared at that note for a long time, though, held it between 2 fingers like it might burn. Then I laid it flat on my desk beside a cooling cup of tea and sat very, very still. It was just paper, just numbers, just a demand from a man who never once said thank you for the years I covered that exact mortgage, quietly, without reminders, without leverage, without a claim to anything but a little dignity. Later that day, while booking a project with a startup in Toronto, my phone lit up. "Dad." I let it ring 4 times. Then I answered. "Sarah," he said without greeting. His voice was tight, measured. "You saw the statement." "I did." "You're still listed on the account." "Yes." "Then why haven't you paid your share?" I leaned back in my desk chair. The studio was quiet except for the distant clink of dishes from the shared kitchen. Outside, someone was humming a melody I didn't recognize. "Because it's not my share," I said, calmly. Simply, there was a long silence. "I don't think you understand how this works," he said, his voice rising. "This is the home you grew up in. The house we built for all of us. You don't just walk away from that." I closed my eyes. "I didn't walk away from a house, Dad. I walked away from being used." More silence. "Do you know what your mother is saying?" he asked suddenly, his voice edged with something darker. "She says you're doing this to punish us." A laugh escaped me, sharp and unexpected. "Punishment would have looked very different," I said. "This isn't punishment, this is peace." His breathing shifted. I could hear it. That moment where frustration teeters into disbelief, like he was finally starting to realize I wasn't bluffing, that I hadn't gone off in a sulk, waiting to be reeled back in. "You're turning your back on your family," he said. "No," I replied. "I'm finally turning toward myself." Another beat of silence. "You're making a mistake," he said, quieter now. And then click, he hung up. I sat there for a full minute, holding the phone like it might speak again. But it didn't. Just the faint buzz of the disconnected line. Just me, the tea, the paper, and the peace. Because it was peaceful, not triumphant, not angry, just done. That call was the final confirmation of something I'd suspected since I walked out of that sunny Sunday brunch. They didn't understand the difference between love and obligation, between family and function, between supporting someone and using them until they finally say, enough. The moment I hung up, something shifted. Like a weight I didn't know I was carrying slid off my shoulders and shattered on the studio floor. I didn't even pick up the mortgage statement. I just stood up, made myself an omelet, and opened all the windows to let the city noise in. Let it rattle the quiet. Let it remind me I was alive and free. That evening, Dina offered me a piece of peach pie she'd baked in the communal oven. We sat on the fire escape and ate it with plastic forks, legs dangling in the chill air. "What's the look?" she asked. I must have been smiling. "I just told someone no," I said, "and didn't apologize for it." Dina laughed. "Revolutionary." "No, really," I said. "I think that was the first time I ever said no to my father without giving a 10-minute explanation or backing down halfway through." She handed me the rest of the pie. "Then this is yours." And in that moment, under the indigo sky, my knees catching the metal slats of the railing, I realized this was what they had tried to take. Not just my money, but my right to say no, and I'd just taken it back. The voicemail came late, just after midnight when everything else had quieted. I saw the missed call first. Claire home. She'd never updated her contact name even after smartphones became the norm. Always home. As if the number alone could summon the illusion of warmth, I let it go to voicemail. I already knew what it was. The message was longer than I expected. Sharp. Controlled. Vicious in a way only someone who's raised you can be. It began with silence, 3 seconds of static and breath, as if she were deciding which version of herself to become. Then her voice cut through. Crisp, unfeeling. "You think you're better than us now, don't you?" No greeting. No hi, honey. Just the verdict. "All your little friends in the city, your online articles, your new life. I suppose they've convinced you that abandoning your family makes you empowered. That being selfish is something to be proud of." She paused, then let her voice harden even further. "Jason is falling apart. Gerald's not sleeping. And Emily's barely speaking to anyone. Do you know what that does to a mother? Watching everything she built start to rot because her eldest child decided she was too good for the rest of us." There was a tiny catch in her throat. Not quite emotion. Not yet. "You could have had a real career. A respectable one. But no, you had to chase some digital fantasy. Fine. That's your choice. But don't expect us to pretend anymore." Then she delivered it, cold and quiet. "You're no longer our daughter." 5 seconds of silence followed. Then the message ended. I sat there, phone still in hand, feeling nothing. Not because I didn't care, but because I'd already mourned her version of me, the obedient Sarah, the convenient Sarah, the fallback girl who carried the weight without complaint. That daughter had already died the day I walked out of their pristine kitchen and left the mimosa-stained brunch napkins behind. I didn't replay the message. I didn't transcribe it or save it or study it like I used to with her words, dissecting them for hidden tenderness. I deleted it. One tap. Gone. It felt cleaner than closure, like sweeping out the last few flakes of shattered glass after a long-ago storm. When I turned around, my roommate Dina was in the doorway, holding a plate with a haphazard slice of cake and a lit birthday candle stabbed in the center. I blinked. "What's this for?" she shrugged. "It's not your birthday, but I figured after everything you've been shedding, maybe it's time to celebrate what you're growing into." I stared at her for a second, then laughed. A real laugh, surprised and grateful and utterly unguarded. The cake was a mess, too sweet. The candle was crooked. It was perfect. We sat on the floor, cross-legged in pajamas, letting the artificial frosting smear our fingers. I didn't tell her about the voicemail. Not in full, just said, "My mom called." Dina didn't ask what she said. She just passed me the last bite of cake and said, "You don't have to carry their version of you anymore." I nodded. That night, I slept with my window cracked open, the city humming in the distance like an old lullaby. The moonlight painted silver lines across the concrete floor. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't dream about going back. I dreamed about going forward. I didn't need to check in to know what happened next. It came in pieces, through whispers from my aunt, through the awkward check-ins from old neighbors who never picked sides, and through silence. That heavy, unmistakable silence that falls when proud people can no longer afford the illusion they built their lives around. The house sold in early March. No announcement. No open invitation. Just a quiet change in the property listing and a sold sign that appeared overnight like a burial marker. The photo disappeared from the real estate site 2 days later. A white lie dressed in clean typography. Relocation due to lifestyle change. A lifestyle change. That's one way to describe losing your safety net because the daughter you ridiculed stopped writing your checks. I saw it unfold like a slow collapse. First came the cars, both leased, both quietly returned. Then the wine subscription Claire used to brag about disappeared. Gerald canceled his golf club membership. Emily started driving to work in Mom's old hatchback, the one with the peeling bumper sticker that said "One Dance, Mom." Jason, no one knew where he was sleeping most nights. The mortgage had always been tight, but I made it bearable. My contributions didn't just cover the gap, they gave them breathing room. Vacations, brunches, weekly Amazon deliveries they didn't think twice about. And now they lived in a beige second-floor walk-up off the I-5. The kind of place with thin walls and buzzing lights and a view of the freeway that never quite went silent. Claire called it temporary. Gerald stopped calling it anything at all. Their new apartment was near a gas station and a shuttered diner. The kind of neighborhood that didn't care who you used to be, where the only luxury was surviving without being noticed. According to Aunt Jill, who still talks to everyone whether they like it or not, Gerald yelled at a cashier when his card declined at the grocery store. Claire cried in the laundry room after Emily snapped at her for buying the wrong cereal. Jason hadn't been seen in 4 days. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. But I did feel something settle inside me, something slow and bittersweet, like watching a wound finally scar over. This wasn't revenge. It was reality catching up. They'd always treated my success like a passing phase, a quirky little thing they didn't understand but were happy to benefit from, as long as I stayed quiet, as long as I didn't ask for anything back. But success isn't charity, and generosity is not a contract you can exploit forever. They never thought I'd walk, and once I did, they never thought I'd stay gone. One afternoon, I opened Instagram and saw Emily had posted a blurry story of her coffee, tagged with a geolocation, Java break off the 5. And just like that, I saw it, the new apartment complex reflected in the window behind her cup. Beige stucco, cracked sidewalk, the shadows of moving boxes just behind the glass. I watched the story twice. Then I closed the app and went back to my writing. That week, I finished a campaign for a mental health startup. They paid me in full up front with a thank you note that said, "You made our message matter." That night, I bought myself a lamp I'd been eyeing for months. Warm light, soft gold, like something I imagined in a different life. It sat on my desk now, glowing over invoices paid and emails unopened from people who only remembered me when they needed something. The house was gone. The illusion was gone. And still, no one called. The house was listed for 42 days before the offer came through. A clean, above-ask bid. No contingencies, no counteroffer. The real estate agent nearly dropped her phone when she saw it. She didn't know the buyer, of course. No one did. The offer came from a firm called Inkhouse Collective, LLC, registered in Delaware, signed with a digital signature from a managing partner no one had heard of. What the agent didn't know, and what the family would never imagine, was that Inkhouse Collective had exactly one employee, one founder, one purpose: me. I'd created the LLC 6 months earlier, quietly, methodically, with the help of a freelance lawyer I met in a Slack channel. It was originally meant to streamline my growing ghostwriting income. But now it had a new role. It bought my childhood home in full, wire transfer, no fanfare. The day the deal closed, I didn't tell anyone. Not Talia, not Dina, not even the client who joked that I must be doing well if I had time to unplug for a weekend. I simply took the train out to the suburbs on a cloudy Saturday, key in hand, hoodie zipped up. No one saw me walk up the curved driveway. No one knew I stood on the porch and pressed my palm to the front door like I was testing if the past would let me back in. Inside, it smelled like nothing. Empty houses always do. Echoes instead of conversations. Dust where there had once been warmth. And under all of it, a strange hollowness, like even the walls were confused about who they belonged to now. I walked through slowly, room by room. The living room, where Jason once built a Lego empire across 3 throw rugs. The hallway where Emily scraped the wallpaper trying to sneak her bike indoors. The kitchen, God, the kitchen with its cold tile and pristine wine fridge. No more brunches. No more rosemary sprigs and invisible expectations. I moved upstairs, trailing my fingers along the banister. My old room was still painted the same pale green, though the curtains were gone. The closet door creaked like it remembered every secret I'd ever buried in it. I sat down on the floor, not because I was tired, but because I didn't know what else to do. There was no satisfaction in this. No cinematic revenge soundtrack playing in the background, just me, the hum of the central air, and the quiet press of memory. I should have felt powerful, vindicated. Instead, I felt unsure. Was this reclamation, or was it grief in disguise? I didn't cry, but I didn't smile either. I sat there for 20 minutes just breathing in the silence. Letting it settle, I owned the house. The deed had my company's name on it. The locks would be changed by Monday. The neighbors would probably gossip. The agent would field curious calls, but not one person in my family knew I was the buyer. And I wasn't planning to tell them. Not yet. Maybe not ever. On my way out, I took one last look at the empty dining room. The table was gone, but I could still see where it used to sit. The ghost of a surface. A battlefield I used to pretend was a home. I closed the front door behind me and didn't look back. I should have known it wouldn't stay quiet. Secrets rarely do, especially not when they're soaked in shame, alcohol, and the grief of someone who never learned how to lose gracefully. It was Jason. Of course it was. It started with a rant. A live video, to be exact. He went live on a Tuesday night at 11:42 p.m. Drunk, slurring, and wearing a hoodie I vaguely recognized from his freshman year in college. His face was blotchy. His words spilled out like venom and regret. "Everybody thinks she's so successful now. She's not, it's all fake," he said, looking straight into the front-facing camera. "She abandoned us. She bought the house just to prove she could. What kind of person does that?" He took another swig from a bottle he didn't bother to hide. "She's been hiding behind some LLC. Inkhouse something. It's all her, it's always been her." That was the moment it happened. The mask dropped. The anonymity I'd built with care, brick by digital brick, crumbled with one slurred sentence. I didn't see it live. I heard about it the next morning when my inbox exploded. Dozens of messages, some from clients, some from friends, some from strangers who found my ghostwriting portfolio through breadcrumbs Jason didn't even know he'd left. One message stood out, a terse, polite email from a recruiter at a fintech company in San Francisco. We were in the final stages of interviewing Jason for a junior analyst role. After last night's live stream, our leadership has opted to go in a different direction. We appreciate your discretion regarding this message. That hit harder than I expected. Not because I felt guilty, but because I could see it so clearly. Jason waking up to silence, opening his phone, seeing the number of views, the comments, the fallout, realizing maybe for the first time that words carry consequences. Especially when you've spent your whole life treating them like currency you never had to earn. He didn't call me. No one did. Not Gerald. Not Claire. Not Emily, who had surely seen the video and said nothing. Not even to ask if it was true. Instead, I watched from afar as the online whispers turned into a quiet reckoning. Jason disappeared from social media. Deleted everything. Claire posted a vague Bible verse about betrayal and bearing the burdens of others. Gerald said nothing at all, just quietly updated his LinkedIn to open to opportunities. Meanwhile, the air in my studio felt thinner. Not from fear, from release. It was out. The truth. I was Inkhouse Collective. The voice behind the brands they mocked. The reason they hadn't drowned sooner. The hand they bit over and over again until it pulled away for good. But now the consequences were real, and Jason had lit the match. I didn't respond, not publicly, not privately. I let the silence do what it does best, separate the ones who act from the ones who expect. And in that silence, something unexpected happened. Clients kept coming. In fact, more than before. Apparently, being outed as the force behind successful campaigns made me more desirable. People love a masked magician, especially when she proves the trick is real. Within a week, I'd filled every available client slot, booked out for the next 2 months, doubled my rates, and still had a wait list. So while Jason sat in the dim light of regret, I stood in the glow of momentum, not because I wanted to win, but because I'd stopped playing their game entirely. The notification buzzed while I was mid-bite of burnt toast. At first, I ignored it. Another DM, probably a client checking on revisions, or a founder circling back before I'd even had caffeine. But then a second one came in, then 5 more. Then Dina shouted from the kitchen, "Sarah, you're trending, kind of." I froze. She darted in with her phone raised, scrolling furiously. "Did you hear this yet?" she asked, half gasping. I hadn't, until she shoved her phone toward me, thumb already hovering over the play button. It was a podcast, Founders Unfiltered, big following, serious guests. I recognized the voice immediately, Serena Baines, my long-term ghostwriting client, queen of calm power, CEO of a wellness startup that went from Etsy to 8 figures in 18 months. The host asked, "You've had a big year, what changed?" And Serena laughed. "You want the honest answer," she said. "I hired a ghostwriter named Sarah Vale. She rewrote everything, emails, landing pages, even investor decks. She gave us a voice we didn't know we were allowed to have." I froze. Dina paused the audio. "Did you know she was gonna say that?" "No," I said, breath caught between fear and awe. "She never even told me she was recording." Dina pressed play again. "She's Loki," Serena continued. "Doesn't take credit, but she's the reason people actually listen to us now. That brand voice everyone loves, that's her." I sat completely still. For 2 years, I'd written under NDAs, white-labeled, invisible. The applause always belonged to someone else. And now, suddenly, publicly, irrevocably, someone had cracked the curtain open. By the time I looked at my phone again, I had 71 unread emails. The subject lines read like tiny bursts of validation. "Loved Serena's shout-out, do you have capacity? Are you the Sarah Vale? Heard your name on Founders Unfiltered. How soon can we start?" My copywriting calendar, usually a carefully tuned engine of manageable chaos, was melting. Wait lists, retainer offers. One founder even asked if I'd train her in-house content team with a budget that made me blink twice. By nightfall, I had to disable my inquiry form and put up a message. "Currently fully booked. Thank you for the overwhelming support." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a good week. This was the turning point. No more anonymous credits. No more bargaining with people who called my work a hobby. I wasn't just surviving now. I was seen. That weekend, I walked downtown, alone, headphones in, playing the podcast again just to hear her say my name one more time. It wasn't about ego. It was about confirmation, that I hadn't imagined it, that this wasn't a fever dream stitched from late-night client calls and imposter syndrome. It was real. And the best part, my family didn't even know. As far as Claire, Gerald, and Emily were concerned, I was still the sister who walked away and disappeared into freelancer land. They hadn't asked how I was doing. Not after Jason's meltdown. Not after Claire's voicemail. Not once. But now I was more than stable. I was thriving. That night I lit a candle and opened a blank Notion doc. At the top, I typed something I hadn't dared to commit until that very moment. The Vale House Project, a retreat for women starting over. Workshops, journaling, guest speakers. Quiet places to become yourself again. The idea had been sitting in the back of my mind for months, but now it felt alive, tangible. A thing I could touch and build and pour myself into. It wouldn't be in the city. It would be somewhere green. Safe, somewhere women could land softly without needing to explain why they left. I closed the doc and whispered, "Soon." Dina passed by my doorway and paused. "You look like someone who just saw their future." I smiled. "I think I did." The envelopes were cream-colored, thick as cardstock, and sealed with wax. No names, no return address. Just 3 words in delicate script across the front, "You're invited." Inside, the message was short. 5 lines. Centered. Housewarming gathering Saturday, 6 p.m. Address enclosed, no gifts. Just presents, dress casual. I sent 3. 1 to my parents' apartment. 1 to Emily's workplace. 1 to the P.O. box Jason used to pick up his court-ordered mail. No signatures, no hints, just the address and a question they wouldn't ask out loud. Who would invite us anywhere now? I imagined the moment they received them. Claire peeling the seal with suspicion. Gerald furrowing his brow. Emily holding the card at arm's length like it might detonate. Jason, I wasn't sure. Maybe nothing surprised him anymore. But they all came. Of course they did. Curiosity is stronger than pride. I stood behind the sheer curtain of the dining room when their car pulled into the driveway. They stepped out slowly, stiff in their too casual clothes, looking around like they were in a dream. The house stood tall, newly painted, the lawn manicured, the front porch aglow with soft amber lighting. Emily was the first to speak. "Is this?" Her voice trailed off. Gerald stepped forward, frowning at the new numbers on the mailbox. "This can't be right." But it was. Claire reached for the doorknob like she'd done 1,000 times before, but it was locked. Her hand lingered there, confused. The porch light flicked on above them. That's when I opened the door, and for a moment no one moved. Claire's hand dropped. Gerald's mouth opened, then shut. Jason blinked like the porch light was too bright to make sense of. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. They entered wordlessly. The air inside smelled of rosemary and lemon. Warm bread cooled on a platter beside the staircase. The hardwood floors gleamed. The chandelier, new, elegant, delicate, cast soft light across the remodeled entryway. They walked in like strangers. Emily looked around with eyes wide. Jason didn't speak. Claire's hand brushed the edge of the table, like she was checking for proof that it was real. "I thought this place was sold," Gerald finally said, voice cautious. "It was," I replied. "To me." Their heads turned in unison. "I bought it," I said simply, motioning toward the dining room. "Come sit." No one spoke as we moved into the room. The table had been replaced with a long walnut slab set with ceramic plates and linen napkins. I'd cooked nothing fancy, just roasted vegetables, garlic chicken, fresh bread, and a bottle of red that I opened myself. We sat. Gerald cleared his throat. "You live here now?" "I do." Jason looked at the plate in front of him. "Why invite us?" I let the silence stretch. "Because you were part of what this house used to be," I said, "and I thought you should see what it's become." Claire's voice cracked slightly. "You bought it through that company," I nodded. "Inkhouse Collective." Emily's fork twitched against the plate. Jason said nothing. "It's not revenge," I added. "It's clarity." They didn't understand, not yet, maybe they wouldn't, but that wasn't the point. This dinner wasn't a trap, it was a declaration. I served the food myself, dish by dish, without help, without ceremony. The only sound was silverware against porcelain and the ticking of the clock above the mantel. Gerald finally muttered, "So this is yours now?" "Yes," I said, looking around the room. "It's mine." And just like that, the silence shifted. Not loud, not hostile, but reckoning. They were sitting in a place they once ruled, now owned by the daughter they dismissed. And it showed in their faces, the recognition, the discomfort, the dawning understanding that I hadn't come back for forgiveness or approval. I'd come back for closure. And I'd brought my own keys. The dining room had never been this quiet. Not when I was 16 and Emily stormed out during Dad's birthday. Not when Jason once blurted out that he wanted to drop pre-law. Not even during that last awful brunch, the one where they laughed at my life. But this silence, it was deeper. It was realization. Gerald set his fork down slowly like the sound might crack something open. His shoulders slumped just a little, but enough to make him look older than I remembered. Claire had stopped eating entirely. Her hands were in her lap, eyes on her plate like the pattern might give her answers she couldn't speak. Jason was the first to break. "I didn't know it would cost me everything," he whispered, barely above the hum of the overhead lights. I looked at him, my brother, unshaven, pale, his hoodie hanging off him like armor that never fit right. "You didn't think it would cost you anything," I replied. "That's different." His jaw clenched. "I was angry." "And careless," I said. Claire's voice cut in, brittle and soft. "He was in pain." I turned to her. "So was I when I paid the bills in silence. When you dismissed my job as cute. When you said I wasn't your daughter anymore." She blinked, once, then again. A single tear slid down her cheek and she made no effort to wipe it. "I didn't mean it." "I know," I said. "You meant what made sense to you then." There was no venom in my tone, just truth, and the absence of apology. Gerald let out a sound somewhere between a sigh and a sob. He pushed his plate back and stared at the empty glass in front of him. I thought you'd come back when we asked. I did, I said, but not because you asked. He nodded, eyes on the table. You were always stronger than we gave you credit for. No, I corrected gently. I was always stronger than you wanted me to be. That landed. The words hung in the air like smoke, faint, undeniable. Emily cleared her throat. Her voice was small, unsteady. Why invite us here? Why now? I took a breath, looked around the room. Because I wanted you to see it. To sit in what I built, not out of spite, but because I needed you to understand that I didn't vanish. I didn't run. I rose. Jason's head dropped. Gerald wiped his face with his napkin, a rough motion. Claire finally spoke again, her voice raw. We were wrong. The words were a whisper, but they echoed louder than anything else that night. I know, I said, and I'm not here to punish you. Jason looked up. Then what are you here for? I reached into the folder on the credenza and pulled out a set of keys, sleek, matte black, heavy in my palm. These are mine, I said, holding them up. The locks are mine, the mortgage is mine, the deed is mine. This house doesn't belong to us, it belongs to me. Silence again, then something new, relief. It passed over their faces slowly like the first breeze after a storm, because now they knew. There was no pretending, no guessing. The power shift wasn't implied anymore, it was declared. And they couldn't take it back. Gerald nodded. Claire whispered, I'm sorry. Jason reached across the table, just an inch. His fingers brushed the edge of his plate, then pulled back like he didn't trust himself to ask for more. I don't know how to fix what I did, he said quietly. You can't, I replied, but you can stop pretending you didn't do it. No one spoke after that. We finished the meal in a silence that felt earned, not tense, not angry, just honest. Before they left, I walked them to the door. Claire hugged me, gently. Gerald shook my hand. Jason looked at me like he might cry, but didn't. And when the door closed behind them, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clear. The knock came just as Jason reached for another glass of water. It was soft, barely there. Not enough to interrupt the dinner we just finished, but enough to draw every head toward the front door like we all felt it at once. I stood, walked calmly down the hall. When I opened the door, a man in a gray uniform held out a sleek black envelope. Courier delivery for Ms. Vale. I thanked him, signed, and turned back toward the dining room. Jason was watching me, elbows on the table, hands fidgeting. Claire looked wary. Gerald had gone pale. I returned to the table and placed the envelope in the center. This, I said, is the last part. They stared at it like it might explode. I broke the seal and slid the documents across the table, 3 pages, perfectly stapled, printed on cream paper. Gerald picked up the first sheet and scanned it, his brow furrowed. Claire leaned in. Jason didn't move. It's an offer, I said. Gerald looked up. You're offering to sell it back to us. Yes, he blinked. Why? Because I want you to choose. Claire whispered. Choose what? To make things right, I said softly. Or to walk away for good. Gerald's eyes dropped to the paper again. Claire read over his shoulder. Jason finally spoke. What's the condition? I looked straight at him. Full reimbursement, I said. Every year of silent support, every payment I made without acknowledgement, every dollar I gave while being told it wasn't real. Claire gasped. You kept track, she asked. No, I said, but I remembered. Every time I covered the shortfall, every time I let it go just to keep the peace, I remembered. Gerald's hands tightened on the paper. I can't, he started, then stopped. We don't have that kind of money. I know, I said. So this is what? Claire snapped. Punishment. No, I said, calmer than I expected. It's clarity. You can have the house, but only if you value it enough to repay what was taken from me. Jason reached for the second page. His eyes scanned it quickly. Then he looked up, and for the first time in years, he looked young, lost. Is this negotiable? No, I said. We sat there in silence. The room felt full, heavy, as if truth had mass. I didn't rush them. I let the weight do the work. Gerald finally slid the contract toward himself, reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a pen. He signed, no words, just ink and breath. Claire stared at him. Gerald, he looked at her, eyes hollow. She already paid, now it's our turn. Jason didn't sign. He stood up, walked to the window, pressed his forehead against the glass. Claire signed next. No ceremony, no speech. Just the sound of pen on paper and a soft exhale afterward. Jason turned around. You don't want us here anymore, do you? I met his gaze. I want to know that if you stay, it's because you understand what that costs, not me, but you. He didn't reply. He walked out. The door clicked shut behind him. Gerald handed me the signed contract. His hand shook. Claire wiped at her face. I walked them to the door again, just like before, but this time I didn't say anything. Just opened it and let the night speak for me. Years later, I stood barefoot in the doorway of what used to be my family's house, and was now something entirely new. The plaque out front read, "The Vale House Retreat, a space for women becoming." It was etched into brushed bronze and set against a smooth cedar post, right where the old rose bush used to fight for light. The lawn was no longer clipped into suburban perfection. It grew wild now, intentional, beautiful. Lavender and thyme edged the walkway. A stone bench sat beneath the maple tree Jason used to climb before he learned shame. Inside, the walls had been painted soft white. The kitchen was twice as big, the island rebuilt from reclaimed barnwood. What used to be the living room now held soft reading chairs and wide windows that invited in morning light like a quiet companion. There were journals stacked on every table, pens in mason jars, fresh tea on the stove every morning before sunrise, and laughter. God, there was laughter in this house now. Not the brittle kind that covered tension, but full, open laughter, often from women who hadn't heard their own voice in years. They came here broken. Some left their husbands, others their jobs, a few just their silence. And every one of them, without exception, wrote their first brave word here. This wasn't about healing what happened in this house. It was about building something that made what happened irrelevant. I passed a hallway now lined with framed notes. I wrote my truth here. I remembered who I was. This home gave me back my story. They came from women who arrived afraid and left authors of their own lives. And in every room I saw a piece of the girl I used to be, sitting at a table full of side-eyes, swallowing her ambition so the family wouldn't choke on it. She didn't live here anymore, but her legacy did. I climbed the stairs, still familiar underfoot, and opened the door to what used to be my childhood bedroom. Now it was the quiet studio. No beds. Just books, a long desk, windows on two sides. A wind chime made of sea glass whispered in the breeze. A woman sat at the desk, scribbling, early 40s maybe, soft hands, tired eyes, but alive. She looked up when she saw me. "This place," she said, shaking her head with a tearful smile, "is the first place I've ever felt welcome." I smiled back. "Then it's doing its job." Downstairs, someone was playing piano, slow, unsure, lovely. I sat on the stairs and let it wrap around me. I didn't think about Gerald or Claire or the contracts or the slammed doors. I didn't need to. They were part of the foundation, not the roof. And as the music rose, I whispered something I never thought I would say, not to them, but to myself. You were always enough. You were just waiting for a place to say it out loud. This house, it listened. And now, it speaks. Have you ever turned a place of pain into a sanctuary of purpose? Let me know in the comments. And if this story reminded you of your own power, hit that like button so it finds someone else who needs it.